Hey there, hello there, Chef Trny. Welcome you to yet another classic soccer video to do with the classic soccer PC game, and hopefully you have fun. We had a rule that all 48 countries that had a team in the World Cup gets to add one team in this 48 team tournament. Um, as you can see, we had preliminary round games, and that's explain everything. Argentina, of course, in the World Cup this year in 2026. Well, in 80, I put their 86 team with Maradona and co. Take on the 58 Swedes. Well, Sweden qualified for the World Cup. So, but their 1958 squad with their three aging forwards that were getting them second place, and they hosted the World Cup in that one. Argentina took care of Sweden 4-0. Australia, represented by the 2014 squad. I kind of had and I didn't know which Australia squad to go for. And Australia qualified against France. France got into the World Cup, and their '98 squad got in. Well, they won the World Cup. I could have easily went with 2018 with a young Mbappe, but I went with the '98 squad. France took care of Australia 2-0. Austria is in the World Cup this year. They're represented in this tournament. They're represented by the '78 squad that actually pulled off a few wins in their buckets, taking on the Ivory Coast, who actually, yeah, Cote d'Ivoire qualified for the World Cup. Is that right? Yeah. Cote d'Ivoire, their 2010 squad that went to Africa and all that. Ivory Coast beat Austria 4-2. Senegal in the World Cup, represented by the 2002 squad. Papa Bouba Diop in his shocking goal against France that sent the World Cup, defending World Cup champs, downhill with that 1-0 game. And they actually went to the quarterfinals in 2002. People forget about that. They actually had to beat, I think they beat Sweden on, yeah, they beat Sweden on a golden goal, or overtime goal, if you will. And then Turkey did it to them. Iran, yes, they're in the World Cup, and yes, they are going to play in the World Cup. Represented by the '98 squad that took down the Americans and all that. Senegal beat Iran 2-0 on aggregate. Costa Rica, represented by the 2014 team. I think Costa Rica missed out. Yeah, I think Costa Rica missed out. And yeah, Costa Rica missed out in qualifying. Or did they qualify? Well, yeah, I think they missed in qualifying. But Costa Rica's in because there are four countries that are making their World Cup debut: Uzbekistan, Cape Verde, um, Jordan, and they say Belize, but I can't be right. What is the fourth country? Ah, excuse me, I have to go to my notes. Format expansion, house selection, floating venues, teams. Yeah, Cape Verde Carousel, Jordan and Uzbekistan will all make their debuts. So obviously they have not qualified. So I had used four countries that missed out on the World Cup that way, and Costa Rica was one of them. Uruguay represented, well, Costa Rica, the 2014 squad that went to the quarters. Uruguay represented by the 1950 squad that crushed everyone in Brazil, especially silencing the Maracana. They won 3-0 in aggregate. Uruguay. Croatia, represented by the 2018 team that should have won the championship but lost to France, taking on the 1970 Brazil team, total team football. Brazil with Pele, Jarzinho, Carlos Alberto, and many others. Brazil won that one 4-1. Americans represented by the 1950 squad. Well, the U.S. one of the three co-hosts. The 1950 squad. I could have easily won 2010 or even 2002, but I went 1950 because that team upset England in the final in the tournament. They take on the Czechs, the 1962 Czechs, that is, the team that shocked everyone by making it to the finals. They were Brazil. They were prey for Brazil, but the Czechs were, and the Czechs actually ended up, um, they beat Scotland in a head-to-head playoff game, and then they got to the thing. Czechs won 6-0 in aggregate. Italy, represented by the 1982 squad, the team that had Paolo Rossi come back from suspension and all that, who shocked Brazil, of course, Rosso's hat trick. And yes, I know Italy did not make the World Cup, but obviously by random draw, they take one of the spots for the World Cup teams that qualified. They took on 2002 Nihon. Japan has not missed the World Cup since '94. and Italy crushed them 7-0. The 2002 team, of course, was a co-host too. Paraguay, represented by the 2010 squad, they are in the World Cup. I couldn't really think of a good Paraguay squad, so 2010 made it. And Cameroon, who actually did qualify or did not qualify? No, I don't think Cameroon qualified. No, that's not true. No, Cameroon did qualify for this year's World Cup. The 1990 squad that gave England a fright in the quarterfinals. Paraguay won that thing 4-1. Scotland, represented by the 78 squad, the team I feel like was the best chance to make it to the knockout stages. Scotland's been to 8 tournaments, no knockout games. I did a video about them 2 days ago. Yesterday. 78 squad, who should have had an easy path, especially over Iran and Peru. They take on the 2010 Kiwis, who shocked a lot of people by taking a point off Italy in the World Cup that year. New Zealand is in the World Cup this year, and New Zealand went on penalties over Scotland. The scene's still typically Scottish. 94 Colombia, represented by the 94 squad, the team that shocked Argentina in Argentina 5-0 and ended up faltering in the World Cup, losing the Americans on an own goal by Andres Escobar that he passed away because of that. South Korea, represented by the 2002 squad, who also were co-hosts, but they got to semifinals because of justification. 2010 South Africa. Yeah, South Africa qualified for the World Cup. Has qualified for the World Cup. 2010, the team Bafana that hosted the World Cup had failed. Against England, their 66 squad. Well, who else could it be? England took that thing 6-1. Yeah, Korea took 1-0 on aggregate. 2010 Spain. Well, Spain represented by the 2010 squad that won the World Cup after so many years of underperforming. And then 2022, the Qatar squad, that only Qatar squad ever to make the World Cup before this year. They were the hosts, and they got their butts handed in this thing 8-0. Tunisia, represented by the 2006 squad. I couldn't find a good Tunisia squad. I almost went 1978. I should have, because that was the year became the first African nation to win a World Cup game. Because Mexico. Germany is in the World Cup. They're represented by the 74 squad in this tournament. Of course, total football. They won 5-0 in aggregate. Egypt, represented by the 2018 squad of Mo Salah and company that made the World Cup. Well, Egypt's in the World Cup. Haiti's in the World Cup for only the second time in history. This year, 2026. 74 was their other year. Egypt won 3-1 in aggregate. Zaire, or now it's known as the Dominican. I always make that mistake. The Democratic Republic of Congo, not the Dominican Republic of the Congo. What am I thinking? Zaire, the team that got whipped 9-0 by Yugoslavia, and Mwepu got red carded and all that. Against Portugal, they're in the World Cup 2006. The influence of CR7 coming through in Portugal and whatnot. Now we are on to the second stage. You see, there'll be 16 countries that are not, that I didn't talk about. I talked about Paraguay, Norway. Norway snuck it their way to the round 32. 94. The 94 Norwegians are represented here. I think that was the best Norwegian squad that went to the World Cup. I would almost had 98. Yeah, Norway's in the World Cup legally. Algeria got by into the last 32. The 80, represented by the 82 squad that actually got bit by Germany and Austria's RG Bargy. Switzerland also qualified for the World Cup in real life. They're represented by the 54 squad that actually put the fear in other nations. And they hosted the World Cup in 1954 too. England and Ghana. Well, England now plays Ghana, the Black Stars who were supposed to help Africa out. Ghana represented by the 2010 team that went to the quarters against Uruguay and was an Asamoah Gyan penalty in regular time away from knocking out Uruguay, but he missed, and then penalties saw Uruguay win. Morocco will face Portugal. Morocco represented by the 2022 squad that actually shocked everyone by taking fourth place, which was pretty impressive. The first African semifinalists ever. And for a time, Morocco's last goal given up was to Canada. True form. You see Egypt, but then they play Iraq. The only time Iraq's been to the World Cup, 1986. The Hussein was Uday being guy. Cote d'Ivoire will face Bosnia. I put the 2014 squad. I think that was the only other time Bosnia has been to the World Cup as a nation. Cote d'Ivoire. Senegal will now have to play Belgium, who made it to the round 32 by randomization. Yeah. 2018 Belgium, the team that was overrated and underperforming. Canada will play the 62 Czechs, but Canada 2022, well, it's either that or 86. 86, Canada gave up 5 goals without scoring against France, the Soviets, and Hungary. They took on Qatar, Croatia, and Morocco. Yeah, Canada scored at least a pair of goals. Well, Panama and Holland both made it in automatically. Panama, the 2018 squad that went to the World Cup, they got to the World Cup by qualifying mistakes by the Americanos. Holland, the 74 total football team that should have won the World Cup, but they lost to the Germans, their old mates. France is there. Saudi Arabia snuck into the round 32. They got a bye. We put the 94 squad in that actually cited Iowa's goal against Belgium that got them to the round of 16. Uruguay's there. There's Turkey. 2002 Turkey squad that shocked everyone by making it to the semifinals. They got taken up twice by Brazil in the tournament, once in group stage and once in the semifinals. But Turkey did take third place over Korea, so that was big. Italy and South Korea, well, they both didn't get buys. Germany and Brazil both didn't get buys. Now they have to play each other. Mexico got a bye. Mexico, the team that is a co-host, 1970 was their better chance than 86 to make it through. Otherwise, they just faltered. Ecuador sneaks in round 32 now. 2006, good squad. And Nigeria, represented by the 98 squad, they take over for somebody else. But yeah, Nigeria didn't qualify for the World Cup in real life. All right, so we're going to simulate the first legs. What's our time at? 11 minutes. All right, we're going to simulate the first legs and then slow play everything else. Here we go. Panama got a red card by Gomez. Red card by Tejera for 50 Uruguay. Ecuador's Hurtado got red carded. All right. On the legs. Okay, so let's see. Holland is crushing Panama. Probably going to win. They win 5-1. An own goal ruins 74 Holland's double shutouts. But Cruyff with 2, Rep, Van Hangam, and Kroll. Rudy Kroll. Argentina crushing Mexico 5-0. And another 2. Feldano and Louis Brown, who actually was was born to English parents, but in Argentina. France leading Saudi Arabia 3-0. They win 3-2. Petit scored, and Jokiev. Olawar and Albishi scored for Saudi Arabia, but it was academic. Czechs beating up on Canada 3-0 and another 3-0. Schroer and 2 by Strupani. So Canada had no chance against the Czechs. At least they made it to Sweet 16 in round 32. 2 goal leads. Iraq up 3-1 on Egypt. And Egypt scored twice on goals by motion, but it was not enough as Amanish scored to make it 4-3. So Iraq will move it to the round of 16. Well, it was a random draw. Yes, it was. Switzerland up by 2 over Algeria. It was 3-3. Assad got carded for Algeria. He scored twice. Bellamy, Egeman, and Faton for the icing on the cake in added time. Switzerland will move on to the Sweet 16. Spain 2-0 in Ecuador. Crushing Ecuador 5-0. Fila with 4 goals. Iniesta scoring. Ecuador had no chance. Italia leading 2-0 in South Korea, trying to get revenge. They got revenge. Tardelli and Graziani scored for Italy. Korea had no answers. None. Zilch. All right, Paraguay leads 1-0 in Norway. And Norway wins 1-0. However, penalties, well, and then penalties, the penalty shootout happens. Leonardson scored for Norway. Riveros got saved. Rechtel scored. Caceres scored. Rushfeldt scored 3-1. So it was 3-1 for Norway. And it looked like Norway was going to win their way to the Sweet 16. Ferris made 3-2. Jakobsen got saved. Benitez made 3-3. Ajvertert was saved. And then Barrios scored. And Paraguay wins against Norway on penalties. Unreal. So yeah, so on penalties, Paraguay won. Germany beat Brazil 3-2, and because Germany scored 3 road goals, Brazil only scored 1 road goal. Germany moves on. Gordon Miller with 2, Breitner scoring. Alberto and Jarzinho scoring for Brazil, but Germany scored because their third away goal, because they won away goals 3-1. Ivory Coast up 1-0. And another three. Drugba with two. Yaya Torre scoring. So the Cote d'Ivoire will move on. Ghana, England tied 1-1. England win to Ghana and win 3-0. Hurst, Hunt, and Styles put the balls in the net. Ghana was trying for a massive upset but couldn't do it. Belgium up 2-1 on Senegal. And another two goals. Eden Hazard and De Bruyne scoring. Belgium trying to prove they're not overachievers. Turkey up 2-1 on Uruguay. And they thought they had it. It was like Turkey went into Uruguay and up 2-1, but Uruguay wins 4-1. Perez Miguez Skivano, the guy who silenced Americana and Chiquia, scoring Hakan Sauce for Turkey, but Uruguay wins 5-3. Well, it was actually 3-3, and then Uruguay scored twice. Bad luck for Turkey. I feel so bad for them. New Zealand up 1-0 in Nigeria, and they tie 1-1. Own goal. What? Olisea scored, but New Zealand shocks Nigeria 2-1. So New Zealand is in the round of 16 of all freaking countries. It's not Canada. The draw was different. And 1-1, Morocco wins 2-1 on aggregate. Valente own goal, and then Saiz. CR7 scored for Portugal, but they couldn't beat Morocco. So it's going to be Paraguay, Switzerland, England, Morocco, Iraq, Cote d'Ivoire, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Holland, France, Uruguay, Italy, Germany, Argentina, Spain, and New Zealand. So we're going to do the draw for the Sweet 16. The rules are none in the same continent unless it can't be done, and none in the same World Cup. First team is the 1982 Italian squad, the team that saw Paolo Rossi come back from suspension, helped Italy win the World Cup in Spain. They take on 66 England. So yeah, so Italy and England, hold your hats. 66 England will have to play someone else because of the continental rule. Unless it can't be done. 19 Next up is 98 France. Well, 66 England winning the World Cup on home turf over West Germany thanks to Hurst's hat trick, including one goal that did not cross the line, and this is coming from an England fan. France, the 98 squad that won the World Cup on home turf, taking down Brazil, although Ronaldo did have a fit. They take on 2010 Paraguay. So France and Paraguay will be the matchup in the Sweet 16 because they're both from different continents and from different World Cups. Next up is 74 Germany, the team that won on home turf. They take on 2018 Belgium, the team that overachieves at times, but Belgium might not be playing West Germany. It might be possible. Next up is 1986 Argentina, Maradona until, the hand of God goal. Even though his second goal was spectacular, and this is coming from an England fan, they take on 1962 Czechoslovakia. So if it was another continental team not named Europe, that would be big. But yeah, it's the 62 Czechs. That matchup is set in stone. The 62 Czechs who shocked everyone by making the finals. 2022 Morocco from Africa, the first African team to make the semifinals, take on the 74 Dutch, Total Football. So they have to face Total Football. And they're from different World Cups. 2010 Cote d'Ivoire, the team that tried to give Africa some happiness. They take on 1950 Uruguay. Now, this is where it would be perfect. It's a perfect switch, and it can be a perfect switch. So 1950 Uruguay will not face Ivory Coast. They'll take on 82 Italy. So a battle of World Cup winners. Uruguay, of course, silenced the Americana. 66 England got moved down to face Ivory Coast. So they kind of got the luck of the draw. So Italy, Uruguay for sure. Different World Cups, different continents. France, Paraguay, yes. Argentina, Czechia, Morocco, Holland, Ivory Coast, England. So Germany, Belgium might still happen. Anyway, next is 2010 New Zealand, the team that actually did better than did they do better than Italy in the World Cup? I don't know. They take on 2010 Spain. Only one tiny little problem though. They can't face each other in the same World Cup. So they're going to move Spain and Belgium. Yeah, they're going to have to move Spain and Belgium. So 2010 Spain, who won the World Cup, they'll take on Germany. As of right now, 2018 Belgium takes on 2010 New Zealand. Yep, that's the rule. And the final two teams are 86 Iraq and 54 Switzerland. So that means Germany Spain has to happen because of the fact that everything else is the battle of two different continents. So yeah, so we do have one all European matchup. So everything else is big. Yeah, every matchup except every matchup has a European team in it. Every one of them. Oh, that's all. So Italy, Uruguay, Morocco, Holland, France, Paraguay, Ivory Coast, England, New Zealand, Belgium, Germany, Spain, Argentina, Czechia, and Iraq, Switzerland. Those are your final 16 for next week. And of course, we'll get through all those teams and all that to make things happen. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.